Good. So thank you for the introduction, Kylie. Again, my name is Meg Keenan. My official title is the Clinical Ops Optimization Program Manager at Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, but I have been working on all things palliative care at Excellus for the last 8.5 years. So what we're going to talk about today is advanced care planning, and then we'll touch a little bit on the medical orders for life-sustaining treatment program, or what we call MOLST. So I just want to note that today is just an informational session. It's not typically what Excellus is known for. It's not about insurance. I give this presentation community-wide, regardless of if you have Excellus insurance or not, excuse me. So if you have questions about your insurance, I'm happy to try and answer it. We also have Jason Orchel on the call here who works at Excellus, who can try to answer those. But what we're going to talk about today is really applicable to everyone 18 and older, and that's advanced care planning. So please feel free to jump in at any time, just unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. You don't have to wait till the end or anything like that. So what is advanced care planning? I kind of like to I use a bunch of terms interchangeably. And I realized at some point throughout doing these presentations that it can be kind of confusing. So what we're going to talk about today is advanced care planning. Advanced care planning is a process of planning for future medical care, just in case you were to lose capacity and needed somebody else to make your medical decisions. You want to make sure that you pick the correct person to stand in your shoes and that you fill out the correct documentation. It's impossible to do anything in New York State without a lot of documentation, as we know. So I use the term advanced care planning to kind of encompass like the whole process. The healthcare agent, term is going to be used, is the person who you designate to make advanced care planning decisions on your behalf. And a healthcare proxy is that piece of paper, that document that names your healthcare agent, and usually a backup healthcare agent as well. So the advanced care planning process is for everyone 18 and older. It looks like probably everybody on this call is over the age of 18, but if you think of, your kids or your grandkids, this would be appropriate for them too. We call it advanced care planning because it's planning for something in advance. And it's outside of just the end-of-life care realm. Anybody can face an acute medical event at any time, and your healthcare agent can step in and make those decisions for you for acute illness, which you expect to recover, or towards the end of life process as well. So I know that's why we try not to use the term advanced care planning, because it makes it seem as though this is for people of advanced age, which is not the case. Advanced care planning is care in advance and appropriate for everyone 18 and older. So there's several benefits to advanced care planning. And a lot of people, the way they like to think of it is it's really a gift to your family. Think of if something were to happen to you, think of the gift you could give them, having already chosen that person that's going to make those medical decisions, and having them and also your family and your friends know what you would want. So it helps to maintain control of you and your family peace of mind, and ensures that your wishes are honored in a time that may otherwise feel incredibly chaotic, and it does help to reduce family conflict and uncertainty. So really, advanced care planning, it's first and foremost a gift for yourself to make sure your wishes are honored, but it's a huge gift to your friends and family to take the kind of like what if out of those situations that are otherwise going to feel kind of out of control. So here, I just have a slide going over the history of advanced care planning. The history of advanced care planning is really the history of young women. So these are some of the famous cases that got us where we are today in terms of recognizing the importance of, choosing that person to make decisions for you and having the laws in place to support that. So we're going to talk about these 3 women today. In all of their cases, they were young, healthy, didn't expect something to happen to them, but it did. And the conflict that arose out of it highlights the importance of advanced care planning. So first we have Karen Ann Quinlan. She's a photo on the right here. Karen lived in New Jersey, I believe it was in the 1970s, and she had an unexpected event that led to her being able to make her own medical decisions. She was left in a persistent vegetative state. So she's in the hospital, her parents come in and they say, you know, have known Karen all of her life. We know that she would not want to live like this. She would not want to live on a ventilator and with a feeding tube. And they asked the hospital to please remove the feeding tube in line with her wishes as they knew them. The hospital in New Jersey would not honor Karen's parents' wishes. They said it would be the equivalent to killing their daughter. So the parents actually ended up suing the hospital, and the case went all the way up to the New Jersey Supreme Court. The court did end up siding with Karen's parents and agreed that they should be now able to make decisions on her behalf based on just her known wishes in the absence of any legal documentation. So Karen did have her feeding tube removed, and she actually ended up living for another like decade almost. Without, excuse me, not her feeding tube, but she got off the ventilator and ended up breathing and living on her own for almost another decade after that. The next case we have here is Nancy Cruzan. She's the bottom left photo. She lived in Missouri. She was in a car accident that left her in a persistent vegetative state. Nancy's parents kind of remembered what had happened with Karen's case, and they came to the hospital and said, hey, we want to be able to make decisions for our daughter as well. We saw how that went down. We want to do the same thing. In this case, the same thing, the hospital would not follow the parents' wishes. And this case ended up going all the way up to the US Supreme Court. And the court had Nancy's parents provide clear and convincing evidence of Nancy's wishes, which they had to gather through a number of different documents. And in the end, the Supreme Court ended up siding with Nancy's parents. She was taken off the ventilator and died in a way that she would have wanted. That's what's really important here, is that she's living life on her terms in line with her wishes. Probably the most advanced care planning case is Terry Schiavo. Some of you may remember this. It started in the 90s and kind of culminated around 2005. And she's the top left photo here. And her case is really what spurred people across the country to start having advanced care planning conversations finally. She lived in Florida. Terry suffered a cardiac arrest that again left her in a persistent vegetative state. And in this case, Terry was married. Her husband stated that she knew her wishes and she would not want to be kept alive in these conditions. Terry's parents disagreed, said she was a staunch Catholic and would believe in, you know, all life-saving interventions to a T. So Terry's husband and her parents were at odds in this case. So Florida, where she was, had surrogacy laws. They took their battle all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court, which ended up siding with Terry's husband. As we know, at that point, President Bush got involved, the US Supreme Court got involved, and it took a number of years and legal battles. And they eventually did, she ended up having her feeding tube removed and then reinserted, but eventually was removed in line with Florida's decisions, which were to side with Terry's husband. And while Terry's husband and her parents never agreed on who should make decisions or what Terry would want, they did agree on that no one else should ever have to go through this. So this is kind of what spurred on the advanced care planning movement, I'd like to say, and really did force people to kind of start having those conversations. So this is oh, yep, go ahead. If nobody has it, feel free to unmute and just ask me a question at any point. But this just kind of shows that advanced care planning happens along a continuum. It goes back to what I say before, that as you move through life, you move through a state from being healthy and independent, and hopefully for all of us, you know, very, very slowly we move to, you know, having advanced chronic illness, approaching end of life, and then ultimately death. Now, everyone along this continuum is appropriate for advanced care planning. They should have a completed healthcare proxy and named a healthcare agent, because as we know, something sudden can happen at any time, and it's good to just have our wishes be known and have someone step in our shoes and make those medical decisions for us should we become unable. Now, I'm interested, do folks here on the call, I can only see some of you, but does everybody have a completed healthcare proxy? No. All right. Looks like we might have some work to do. I did not, but I did complete my first healthcare proxy probably within 6 months of starting in this position almost a decade ago. I've since updated it a couple times, and I'll talk a little bit about that further down the line. But I know it seems kind of weird, but that's the culture change that we're trying to achieve here. Advanced care planning is really for all adults. Now, when you get towards the pink side of the spectrum here, approaching end of life, you're going to be appropriate for something called MOLST, medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but MOLST is only for seriously ill people at the end of life. A healthcare proxy and having a healthcare agent, appropriate for everyone. So we've already talked a lot about this. Allow someone to stand in your shoes and make medical decisions on your behalf if you lose the ability to do so. All the healthcare proxy requires is that you have 2 witnesses to you designating the agents and signing the document, and neither of those witnesses can be your healthcare agent. Before this, I used to work in an OB/GYN office, and so I was the witness to a lot of healthcare proxy completion of pregnant women who were completing their healthcare proxies just to be sure before they gave birth. So you don't need a notary, you don't need an attorney or anything like that. All you need is 2 witnesses to the document, and neither of them can be the healthcare agent. And these conversations and the signing of this can be done over the phone or over video conferencing. You can fill it in like that. We've dealt a lot with that in COVID, especially, and then in a post-COVID age here. So like I said before, no attorney or notary needed. Lots of times they'll include it in their services, which is fine. You know, it's an important document that probably you should give to your attorney along with some other stuff, but you don't need to pay an attorney or anything like that specifically to complete a healthcare proxy with you. You can do it just with your loved ones. What it does need to include is conversation with your chosen healthcare agents and your other loved ones. If you complete a healthcare proxy and you name your agents and you don't have a conversation with your healthcare agent about what makes life worth living to you and what you would want, the document is essentially useless, and you're kind of putting your that healthcare agent in a tough spot to make medical decisions on your behalf when they don't know what to do. So it's good to obviously tell your healthcare agents what you want, but also to tell your other loved ones who you've chosen as your healthcare agent and why. You can start out simply. It can be just, hey, I chose this person to be my healthcare agent. This is why. And the conversations can develop from there to include what values, beliefs, and goals are important to you. So I know when I had my latest healthcare proxy conversation with my husband, we went back and forth, and what matters most to me is I'm good staying here as long as I can communicate in some way and be understood in some way, even if it's through like eye blinking or something like that. As long as we can find a way to communicate and it's still me in there, that I would want to stick around. He believes when it's his time to go, it's his time to go, and he, would never want to be kept alive on a ventilator or bedbound or anything like that. So his ideas for what makes life worth living are a little bit different than mine. My coworker's brother, who is actually a physician, believes that to him, what makes life worth living is just being medically alive. So you can see that along the spectrum, people have lots and lots of different ideas about what makes life worth living to them. So it's really important that you have these conversations with each other before you choose your healthcare agent about what you would want. Now, you don't have to cover every scenario, but it's good to just give a you know, like a broad idea of what makes life living for you. Your healthcare proxy is valid forever unless you include a term date on it or something like that, which they aren't included ever. So it's good, you know, for your entire life. It is important to review periodically to make sure that your healthcare agent is still appropriate, like you haven't gotten a divorce from your husband, or your healthcare agent hasn't passed away or something like that. So qualities of a good healthcare agent. Seems simple, not always is. So choosing the right healthcare agent is critical. It's not always the obvious choice. And we get calls all the time, I can't tell you how often, from someone in a nursing home that kind of chose the wrong healthcare agent and is now suffering the consequences of that. They chose their oldest child just because they were the oldest, or they chose their daughter who's a nurse just because she's a nurse, but didn't really have those conversations and didn't ensure that they were really going to be the right healthcare agent for them. So you want to choose someone. It's not the easiest job being a healthcare agent. You want to choose someone who's going to be able to separate their emotions from the situation, and make decisions the way you would want them made and not the way they would want them made. So it's definitely not a job for everyone. So take my mom, for example. My mom and my stepdad are happily married, have been for some time, but my stepdad has never been my mom's healthcare agent. It has always been me. And it's because she sat us down. We have the conversation periodically. This is not my stepdad's jam. He doesn't like talking about this kind of stuff. He doesn't really feel that comfortable with it, and that's fine. And so she says, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not going to choose you. I'm going to choose Meg. And what she says is, because you wouldn't be able to pull the plug. And she knows that he probably in that situation might not be able to separate his emotions from the situation and be able to do what's right for her. So on the other side of the coin, though, my mom has never been my healthcare agent because she is also super emotional. And yes, she knows what I want, but I don't think that she would be able to take her emotions out of it. You know, I'm too close. She loves me a little bit too much. So from the get-go, my mom has always been my backup agent. Before I got married, my aunt was actually my primary healthcare agent. So a little bit out of whack. Now that I'm married, I had to update it, and mom got bumped right out of there. My husband is my primary healthcare agent, and my aunt is my alternate. Everybody's aware of the situation. Everybody knows what I want. You know, and it's almost like I'm doing it to my mom because I care about her so much. And I wouldn't want her to have to deal with that when I know like my husband can do it fine. And then my aunt can act as a great backup, you know. So you really have to, it might be the obvious choice, you know, it might be your husband, it might be your oldest kid, but you just have to make sure that you're making the right decision, that they have the right qualities for you. Other important qualities, it's a plus if they have the ability to navigate the medical system and are able to answer other family members' questions. But you know, like I said before, you don't have to choose a family member. You can choose a trusted close friend. The main goal is just someone that would be able to do what you would want. Your healthcare agent, I put an asterisk next to this bullet that says live close by or be willing to come. It's been a while since we updated these, and in today's day and age, you know, being willing to come or being available, they can just be available by phone or video conferencing, and that is good enough. You don't have to choose someone. And this has actually happened to me personally, you know, where you go into the hospital for maybe just like a simple outpatient surgery, and they want you to choose a spokesperson for that day, or to fill out a new healthcare proxy and to make it the person who's, you know, giving you a ride that day. And that's not necessary. You always want to bring a copy of your healthcare proxy with you in that situation. And it doesn't have to be whoever drove you that day. You know, you say, nope, this is my healthcare agent. If you have, if I'm, you know, unable to make medical decisions, this is who you should call. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So Kylie kind of gave me a great lead into this next slide here. April is Advanced Care Planning Month, and April 16th specifically is what we call National Healthcare Decisions Day. It is celebrated on April 16th every year because that is around tax day, and it's to go in line with Ben Franklin's famous quote that the only two things certain in life are death and taxes. So we say it's celebrated on April 16th, but you know, advanced care planning takes up the whole month, and you can really celebrate an HDD, which we call it National Healthcare Decisions Day, whenever your family, your friends gather together, whenever it's natural that you come together to have these conversations. So National Healthcare Decisions Day is a call to action, and it's a reminder to start that advanced care planning conversation if you haven't already, or to review those documents to make sure that the healthcare agent that you've chosen is still appropriate. Like I mentioned before, that they haven't passed away, and if they're your spouse, that you're not legally separated to them or anything like that. We realize that sometimes starting these discussions can be a little bit tough, you know. We recommend using real stories, or if you don't have real stories, we have this Compassion and Support YouTube channel that has a bunch of real advanced care planning stories that you can view to kind of help get the conversation going. Now, my old boss, her name was Dr. Patricia Bama. She kind of was the leader of the MOLST program that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I chose this photo here with this slide because she always used to promote advanced care planning around Thanksgiving, and her motto is always no pumpkin pie until you tell me how you want to die. So you can start with that, and it doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to have a April 16th healthcare proxy party. You can do it, you know, whenever your family is naturally around. So this is an end of life care survey that we did amongst upstate New Yorkers. This was pre my time. This was done in 2008. But it's all of New York. We did all of upstate New York. It was included in the survey. And we asked a few questions, but the two that I have here are this, that shows the disparity between what people think of advanced care planning in terms of importance and people that actually have a healthcare proxy form completed. So you can see this darker pink line on the left, the survey respondents who said that completing a healthcare proxy is very important or fairly important. In the line on the right here is a percentage of folks who actually had completed healthcare proxies. Now, the 42% in upstate New York here is actually very high. If you go downstate or in some other states, the completion percentage is around 20%. So believe it or not, up in upstate New York, we're actually doing great with healthcare proxy completion, but we're not quite there yet. So culture change is the key to filling in these gaps. I work a lot with, you know, clinicians, encouraging them to have advanced care planning discussions with their patients. But we also do a lot of grassroots efforts and just go out into the community and encourage folks to have their healthcare proxies filled out as well. You know, talking about death isn't going to make it happen. And we do have a lot of resources that can help you start the conversation. So it's good to remember, it's important to remember. I hope all of you on this call, if you haven't done your healthcare proxy, are going to, you know, come away from this at least, you know, putting it on the to-do list. But it's important to remember that it is for everyone 18 and older. So if you do have adult children or grandchildren, this is also for them too. So I'm going to talk a little bit, not too much, about another advanced directive. It's the living will. So does anybody have a living will? It's different from a last will and testament, and it's different from appointing a power of attorney. So living will, they've been around for a while, and they're somewhat useful, but they're not the best thing to have in terms of advanced directives. It's better than nothing, but we would much rather that you have a healthcare agent and a healthcare proxy completed. So like I said before, it's different from a last will and testament that, you know, hashes out like who gets your house and your car and stuff like that. And lots of people think that having a power of attorney means that they can also make medical decisions for them, and which is not the case. The power of attorney only covers legal and financial aspects. So living wills are optional. I think of them as like optional documents. They can sort of complement your healthcare proxy. But that healthcare proxy is crucial. It's so crucial, it's like almost mandatory. Living wills can only be used for terminal and irreversible conditions. So in today's day and age with modern medicine the way it is, those two things don't go hand in hand very often. You could have a terminal condition such as like dementia, and then you're living with it. And we always say, because I work in a lot of end-of-life care, that pneumonia can be the old person's best friend. Living will would not go into effect because the dementia is terminal, but the pneumonia potentially reversible. So situations in which living will can be used are kind of scarce. They're often very specific or too vague, and people typically write them well in advance of needing them, and they can never be followed in an emergency. If you've collapsed in your home, EMS unfortunately can't come to your home, open your living will, and try to honor it. It's great for the future, and it's useful in a situation where your healthcare agent is not available, or you really can't think of a healthcare agent. You don't have anyone that would be a good fit for that. In that case, a living will is good for you. And in that case, your doctor could follow your living will and honor your end of life wishes to the best of their ability. But it's not a replacement for a human healthcare agent who knows your wishes and knows what makes life worth living to you, if that makes sense. So this is our website here. This is a homepage, how it looks. This is compassionandsupport.org. We have a ton of information on here about advanced care planning, palliative care, pain and symptom management, and death and dying. It's sort of cut off in the upper right-hand corner here. You'll see a shopping cart, and if you go in there, you can order a number of different educational materials free of charge. The most popular by far is our advanced care planning booklet. And what it does is it kind of walks you through the advanced care planning process that we just discussed. And in the back of the booklet are the actual documents. So there's a living will and a healthcare proxy form in there. And then in the back, there's actually a tiny little like healthcare proxy wallet card that you can cut out to keep in your wallet. So I would highly recommend checking that out, especially if you have more questions, and please take advantage of those free advanced care planning booklets. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about MOLST. Has anybody on this call heard of MOLST? You have, Kylie.
I have.
Okay, yeah. So Jason, thank you. So MOLST stands for Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. I would be highly surprised if anybody on this call was appropriate for MOLST today. But if you have aging parents or grandparents who are approaching the end of life, this may be something for them to think of. So MOLST it was approved for use in all care settings in 2006. It is used to kind of replace that living will, which we talked about before, can only go into effect in very limited circumstances. Example would be like dementia and that pneumonia, where the dementia is terminal, but the pneumonia is potentially reversible, so living will can go into effect. So this MOLST program was designed to ensure that patient wishes are honored at the end of life. So I keep using the word the MOLST process. And what it is, it's a series of conversations between the patient and their doctor, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant. And the end results is this set of actionable medical orders, like a prescription, sort of, that every healthcare professional must honor. But it's sort of like a booklet that's bright pink in color and has a list of life-sustaining treatments that the individual would or would not want at the end of life. So MOLST is very different from an advanced directive. It sort of gets lumped in with advanced directives quite a bit, but they're actually fairly different. So we talked about before, advanced directives are appropriate. When I say advanced directives, I mean a healthcare proxy or living will, are appropriate for everyone 18 and older. On the flip side of the coin here, MOLST is only appropriate for seriously ill individuals near the end of life. I'm not appropriate for MOLST. Doesn't seem like anybody on this call is appropriate for MOLST today, but we should all have that healthcare proxy in place for all over the age of 18. So MOLST is not an advanced directive, but it complements your healthcare proxy form. So if something were to happen to you, and you're nearing the end of life, and you lose capacity, your healthcare agent could actually complete your MOLST for you. So MOLST is not a substitute for an advanced directive, even if you're at the end of life. Everyone needs a healthcare proxy as a base, and then towards the end of life, if you'd like one, you can have a MOLST form. So again, advanced care planning is planning for care in advance for something that might happen. MOLST is for current care. It's not for future care. It's really, really customized based on your current health status, prognosis, and goals for care. And because it's for current care, it's reviewed really, really frequently, and it's only for a small subset of the population. Yep. So who is appropriate for MOLST? MOLST is appropriate for people who it wouldn't surprise you if they were to die in the next year. And this gets people a lot. They're like, well, I could go out there today, get hit by a bus, and boom, I'm dead. Yes, but it would be surprising. So would it surprise you if this person were to die in the next year or two? If the answer is no, they're probably most appropriate. This could be somebody my age who has end-stage cancer, or it could be an otherwise healthy 90-year-old. It would never surprise you if a 90-year-old were to pass away in the next year or two. They have achieved, advanced age, as we like to say. And they've kind of like earned the right. They have preferences about what they want and don't want right now, today, regarding their end of life care. Then they get to complete a MOLST. Now, it's not for somebody who turned 65. If somebody's who turned 65 who is otherwise very healthy and up and walking around, it would still be surprising if they were to die in the next year. So it's really your advanced age, especially now with medicine, is really like around the 85 to 90 mark and higher. And it's when it's people younger, it has to be coupled with people who live in a nursing home or advanced chronic illness or something like that. So other folks that might be appropriate for MOLST, like I just said, folks that live in a long-term care facility or need long-term care services at home. So they'll live in a nursing home, or if somebody is living in assisted living, they're not necessarily appropriate for MOLST, but it's a good indicator that they might be kind of on their way, especially if they need help frequently and are becoming more frail or have one or more chronic illnesses. Like we mentioned before, MOLST is for current care, and it's really customized, so it has to be reviewed fairly frequently. It has to be reviewed if it's being completed in the community every 90 days. In a nursing home setting, which is where it's like most frequently used in New York State, that renewal period is every 60 days. That's why this is just for a small subset of the population. Like we said, we expect for them to be experiencing end of life within the next year or two. And so it gets reviewed really, really frequently to make sure that their health status or prognosis hasn't changed and that it's up to date with their current wishes. Now, that being said, we have a lot of people in New York who have MOLST appropriately in their home. And if the 90 days pass and they didn't, they had to reschedule that doctor's appointment, they didn't get to review their MOLST, it still remains legal and valid. We just try to make sure it's reviewed on time, like I said, so it stays in line with health status, prognosis, and goals for care. So it's important to note, sorry, I'm looking at my own notes here. It's important to note that like all MOLST decisions that are made around the person's goals for care in line with their health status. So we have somebody that might say, if the good Lord takes me in my sleep tonight, I am a-okay with that. But I might, if I caught pneumonia or something, I might go to the hospital and try to accept some treatment for it because I really want to see that great grandchild be born this summer. So it's, like I said before, it's really customizable. So say, I've got this person, obviously if they're found and their heart's not beating, they don't want to be resuscitated, but if they get sick, they would probably take some life-sustaining treatments to try and get better to see that great-grandchild. Now, say they make it to summer, great-grandchild's born, they get to see them, and they end up getting sick, put in the hospital, put on a ventilator for a while, and end up coming off of it, and they say, holy cow, that was awful. I never want to see the inside of another hospital again if I can help it, and I definitely would not want to be intubated again. You know, I've saw that great-grandchild, I am good, you know, going whenever the good Lord takes me, no matter the case. That would be a good time to have another MOLST discussion and update based on their current goals. And you can see how in this subset of population of people that their health is usually changing pretty rapidly, and that's why it needs to be reviewed so often. So the benefits of MOLST. It was created by the community-wide end-of-life palliative care initiative to provide a single common document that would function as an actionable medical order in all care settings in the community. So some of you may have heard before of like a non-hospital DNR. This MOLST, the non-hospital DNR still exists, but it's almost defunct at this point because the MOLST has replaced it. And the MOLST is actually the only do not intubate order in the state that EMS can follow. So actually I have a personal story about this. My stepdad's parents, my grandparents, my grandmother had a non-hospital DNR and ended up having an event where 911 was called and she didn't want to be resuscitated, but didn't want to be hospitalized. But her heart was still beating. She was just unconscious and she was still breathing, but she was having a lot of trouble breathing. So my uncle, who was her healthcare agent, was there. And even though he said that she didn't want to be intubated, didn't want to be transported to the hospital, they had to legally intubate her and take her to the ICU, where she was later extubated and passed away. So it was an unfortunate event for sure. It was a few years ago, but MOLST is the only do not intubate order that EMS can follow in our state. So if people are walking around with a non-hospital DNR and thinking that they're good, unfortunately they're not. You need a lot of paperwork in New York to die, and the MOLST kind of puts all that paperwork into one form for you. So for folks that, again, not for any of us, but if we have parents or grandparents who are most appropriate or maybe have a MOLST, it's appropriate that they take it with them across care settings. So if you're in a nursing home and you are transported to the hospital, the MOLST goes with you so it can be honored across care settings. If you're living at home, lucky enough to be living at home, and you have a MOLST on your fridge, and you got to go, to the grocery store, you got to go to Wegmans and pick up that delicious queso I was talking earlier about with Kylie. It's important that the patient makes sure that they bring that MOLST with them, puts it in their purse or whatever. So if something happens at Wegmans, it can be honored by EMS in the community. And MOLST is the only form that can do that. So these are the elements of the MOLST form. Since nobody's familiar with it, I probably won't go over these in depth. It was actually just revised earlier this year in 2023, in line with a lot of needed clinical edits, but it covers the life-sustaining treatment that it covers is CPR, intubation, hospitalization, fluids, nutrition, antibiotics, and dialysis. It's important to note that all of these decisions about these specific life-sustaining treatments are made in line with the patient's goals for care, and that there's a care plan in place. So there's a new option in the form to not be hospitalized under any circumstances. In order for that to be followed, you would need to make sure that the patient has a care plan in place that can support that. Because completing a MOLST doesn't mean that you won't be treated. MOLST wishes are only honored as long as the patient's pain is managed and that they're comfortable. So comfort care is the baseline. Everybody receives that. We don't want anybody, to pass away in pain. But these are new and revised elements to ensure that the life-sustaining treatments you want or do not want are followed.
One of the questions in the chat was asking, would a copy of the form be honored?
Yes. Yes, that's a great question. So the MOLST is typically printed on this pulsar pink paper, we call it, so it's easy for EMS to see in emergency. However, faxes, photocopies, pictures of it on your phone, legal and valid, all good. So that's a great question. We prefer to have it printed on that pink paper. But yeah, if it's easier for you, you're headed out to Wegmans and you want to, you're with your parent and they have one and you want to just snap a couple of pictures of the current MOLST to bring with you, that is legal and valid as well and can be honored.
I was going to mention too, if you have it on your fridge and EMT comes to the house, they're going to take your copy. So it's best to have a copy somewhere that's not going to be taken.
Yeah.
Just so you know what it says.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And it should, like, yep, again, it should travel with the patient, but as you as their caregiver want to keep, the only thing I would mention with that is because it's updated so frequently, you want to make sure that whatever the copy that you have is the most current version. And a lot of these, it's not like people who have MOLST for years, it's not like they're changing every 60 days typically. And we do have people that have MOLST for, 10 years. We have people that got MOLST when they were 85 and maybe their wishes have changed a little bit, but now they're 95 and they're still living with that MOLST. So you don't really have to, you don't have to die on time with a MOLST or anything like that. But it's just, if you have folks who have reached advanced age, even if they're otherwise healthy, if they have preferences about what they would and would not want at the end of life, they can have a MOLST. My dad is a ER physician and he just turned 71, but he's like almost like a marathon runner still, and he would like a MOLST. He really doesn't want to be resuscitated. And I'm like, you're not old enough yet, you haven't reached that advanced age yet, Dad. Like maybe 10 more years we can talk about it, but not quite yet. So there's kind of like a fine line with that. So sorry, I got a little bit off track here, but this is like our this is our other community website. It's sort of a sister website. So that website I was showing you before, it's MOLST.org. So this website, we used to just have one. And a few years ago, we realized that we had so much information about MOLST because there's so many New York State public health laws tied to it and stuff like that, and specific requirements for different people depending on their circumstances, that we decided to carve out a whole website just for MOLST. So this is MOLST.org. We try to make it for patients and families and providers alike. So it goes through the steps of how to complete a MOLST and then sort of the ethics and laws behind it, and then some training and other resources there. And there is a link to the same in the upper right hand corner, the shopping cart. It'll link you to the same shop where you can get those free resources I mentioned before from the other website. They're kind of tied together in that way. So that is the end of my formal presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has one. I know I covered kind of a lot of information.
You did say the advanced care planning forms are on your website under the advanced care planning tab or section. Okay.
You're muted. Meg, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I don't know how I did it. It was with my space bar somehow. So yes, I'm so sorry. So you can go on to compassionandsupport.org. And under the category, it's called Community Conversations on Compassionate Care, it's CCCC. There's a page underneath it that you can mouse to called Advanced Directives. And there We have the living will document in the healthcare proxy document, both in English and in Spanish, if you're just looking for that. We also have the whole advanced care planning booklet that you can download also on that page, I believe. And then if you're looking to order the whole advanced care planning documents, you would click on the shopping cart in the upper right-hand corner. And so that the healthcare proxy, I should probably mention this as well. If you have relatives that live like out of state, that healthcare proxy that we have on there, most of them are state specific, because each state has different laws regarding end of life care, and New York's are like particularly complicated, shocker. So if you have individuals who are looking for information on advanced directives from other states, it's caringinfo.org. It's all that we link to it on Compassion and Support somewhere. They're usually, I've never heard of them not being honored across state lines, but it's always good to fill out one specific to your state. Or if you have snowbirds or whatever, like my parents spend half of the year in Florida, they have a Florida healthcare proxy and a New York healthcare proxy. They all have the same information on it, but they have both just in case. Does anybody have any other questions?
I did put the link to the website in the chat, just so people could click on it before we close out of the class today, and kind of save it for later to dig through and see what all great resources you have on there. I have also shared this website on our Facebook page, which is GTC Municipal Health Insurance Consortium. This month, because it is Advanced Care Planning Month, there's great information on our Facebook page about all these different features, as well as power of attorneys, last will and testament, little short YouTube videos with information, and also tips and tricks to start having this conversation with your family are up there too, because we all know this is a difficult subject, but one that really should be touched on. So just some things to keep in mind. And I see that Meg posted her email address in the chat as well, in case there's more direct questions you think of later on. But thank you so much. This presentation was wonderful, and I really appreciate the few that joined us this evening.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kylie.
All right. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Great job, Meg. Thank you, Kylie. Bye, everybody.
Bye.